So, welcome to another episode of Inside the Mind of the Artist. Inside the Mind of an Artist. Today we have Stacy Phillips, who I am so excited to have. I've known Stacy, we're going on 20 years. And I met Stacy as a sculptor, and really watching you, Stacy, over the last couple of decades and see you bloom into this painter and this mixed media artist. You're a really hard worker, and it's been a pleasure to watch you. So welcome, Stacy. I'm very glad to have you.
Thank you, Lauren. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And as you and I work very differently, but then we don't in many ways. I mean, we have been friends for so long. And whenever you come to visit and we do a workshop together, or you're just visiting me, we've decided you and I could be roommates so easily, because the way we flow with our life is insympatical. It's sympatical. Yeah. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today is, wow, a lot on the table. I mean, you and I kind of share, we have a lot of bitch sessions on the phone. Stacy, by the way, is living in Salt Lake City, and I've known her in Park City. We both actually have a gallery, Trove Gallery, that we're represented by in Park City. And being a West artist, a West Coast artist, like, where were you born? Where'd you grow up? Just give us the short answer.
Short answer. Okay. I was born in Sacramento, California girl. But I only lived there for about 2 years. I've lived all over the country. I've moved, I think I last counted 50 times. So, yeah. And I've been in Utah for a long time, but I travel quite a bit. I've lived in Mexico and went to graduate school in Miami, and
traveled. Is in what and from where?
University of Miami. I just went for a year. That's another conversation, because I decided that I could make more work outside of graduate school than I could in graduate school. But I've been in Utah and full-time artist for over 20 years now. I owned a gallery in Park City for 9 years. So I've always been involved in the arts in one way or another. But
so you understand the marketing end of the making of art pretty well.
Yeah, I have a business degree as well. I have a fine arts degree and a business degree, and was raised by a corporate father. And then having the gallery, I learned that part of the business. So I'm very comfortable navigating with galleries, and I understand what their needs are, as well as the artists. So I'm an advocate for myself that way.
So when I met you, I think it was probably around 2005, 2004, right around there. You were doing these elaborate figurative sculpture works that were in bronze, and I know you went to the bead show often, because these figures were just. You still make them?
I do. They started out in ceramics, and so my background in work is in jewelry and ceramic sculpture. And they started out as these torsos, these female and male torsos, and I think my passion for adorning, the beads and the jewelry came in. And so they had all of these skirts, whether they were skirts that I made, beads, some of them were plastic things that I found. And then they elaborated into 5 feet tall, 16 inches wood, rattlesnake bones, crystals, all kinds of things. But yeah, yes, I do still make them. I'm not making them actively. They're quite expensive to make because of the materials. And as an artist, as you know about me, I'm always growing and thinking, what if I work in a different material? How would this translate into a different material? And Coda Gallery in Palm Desert represents me as well. And they have my torsos, as well as Trove Gallery in Park City. And I'm making them mostly on commission now because I'm painting, and I'm painting now, but my paintings also become very sculptural too, just because of my love for process and media and materials.
And also, I've noticed, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, you've really, after exploration in mixed media and doing abstract works, you're kind of coming back home to the figure. So there's a couple, two questions I want to ask, and you might be able to weave them together. And that is, how do you define the difference between high craft and fine art, craft and fine art? And what does the figure mean to you? Why the figure?
Those are good questions. And just for all of you to know, Lauren and I talk a lot, so we're always processing on our phone calls and when we're communicating. So we talked about a little bit about this. They're big questions. So let's talk about craft and art. It's a long conversation. It's a conversation that's been around for a long time, that question. Part of me is, I never want to debate that, is it art or is it craft? Because I think the two are so intertwined. I have a high regard for craft. I have a high regard for materials. I am a working artist for Golden Paints, which means I'm an educator for Golden Paints for their materials for the state of Utah.
Tell people what Golden Paints is
exactly. Sure. I'm backing up a little bit. Golden Paints is a company out of New Berlin, New York, and they make golden acrylics, mediums, pastes, gels. They also own pan pastels. They own core watercolors and Williamsburg handmade oil paints, which are gorgeous. And so I'm an educator for them. They trained me, and I educate people on their products. And which leads to, I'm a material junkie anyway. I'm always cute. My boyfriend says that I should have been an engineer. I'm always figuring out like how things work together and why. And then I'm also a coach for Nicholas Wilton for the Art to Life program for CVP. And I'm specialized in materials with them as well. And all of that has come through my love of materials and my search of materials. I created after graduate school, like I would just take workshops that I was interested in. Like, how would this fit into my curriculum? Whether it's mold making or oil and cold wax or processing, all different kinds of processes. And because of that, following that line of thinking, following that thread, I ended up with a really amazing education in my mind on materials. And it's not just materials. You don't go to a 2-week, 6-week workshop at Anderson Ranch on, how to print make and not talk about concept. So I have a high regard for craft. I'll circle around with that. And I don't differentiate between the two in the sense that you need craft in order to create your artwork, in my mind. It allows me, my knowledge for craft, meaning materials, it allows me to have the freedom to have more information to follow through with conceptual ideas that I might have.
Do you mean really know your craft so then you can break the rules?
Totally. And also so it doesn't fall apart. So it doesn't, I've painted before and had something pull up and found out that the whole painting was separating. Because
archival, what's archival and not, right?
What's archival or not, and there's and I'm a maker. I'm a maker. I use my hands, and I'm a maker. Yeah. And so I really don't like to, even though there's all these questions about how we want to identify ourselves. I ran it up against it in ceramics. Are you a high fire or are you low fire? Are you a functional artist or are you a sculptor? Are you an oil painter or acrylic painter? Are you figurative or are you abstract? For me, that's jail.
You're an artist.
I'm an artist. And So it's my love and my passion for materials it's intertwined and so mixed into my life and my art now that I don't differentiate between the two.
So I'm going to circle back
Sure.
and ask, what do you think the difference between craft and fine art is, if there's a difference?
Well, I think that the traditional answer of that is craft would be, I guess, and don't hold me to this, would be, functional materials that are functional, the craft of ceramics, the craft of quilting, which I grew up quilting and needle pointing, and the craft of basket making. Is it functional? But who's to say that by being a basket maker and you're a crafts person, that you're not expressing yourself and creating and pushing your boundaries? So I don't know the answer to that, what the difference is.
It's just sort of almost philosophical. Now, I just had a memory, and I think about this from time to time, but when I was really young, I remember maybe my parents might have brought me to a museum or something like that. And I can remember it was a painting, probably a large scale painting, and I was checking out the sides. And
Mm.
it seemed that all these drips were just, from the process of painting, there's the kind of the residue of the drips. And I was just thought that was unbelievable. And I can remember going home and painting with my crayon set and whatever, my paints. I was trying to contrive the drips. I didn't have a connection between what this finished product was and what process really meant.
Mm-hmm.
I remember something profound in that. And I do remember years of getting into art when I had this kind of epiphany, like an aha moment of, oh, there's this residue with the drips and the this and the that create its own narration, its own story.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's really fascinating. Like I realize that my materials that I use and the classes that I teach, let me back up. There's process, but there's a point where you get to where the process starts to disappear. Like I'm not focused on creating encaustics with acrylics or doing a specific thing. I want my ideas to come through. I want you as the viewer to be able to see my thought process. And when you have access to how to use different materials, that becomes habitual. So it doesn't become about that I'm trying to communicate. Maybe that's what craft is. I'm not sure.
The end, or you have these tools and you don't want, I don't know, when it becomes about the material itself, it's like, what category, if it's not really a category, but where do we put that? Like I was having a conversation with an encaustic artist who was telling me that to take a photograph, and say you have the photograph and you put encaustic over it,
right,
and hang it on the wall, he was telling me that was a painting. And I was saying, I don't think that's a painting. And he's like, it is a painting, because if you're going to infuse even a little bit of color in there, you have now changed the constitution of the photograph. So it's a painting. And I guess I come from this purist idea that I wouldn't say he swayed me to that camp, but I started to appreciate what he's seeing. But I still feel like it's a photograph with an encaustic film.
Well, it is, but you know what? What difference does it make?
It
Let's
does.
back down. Let's back down to your work or our work. That's a painting, but that is acrylic mediums built up to create texture and drawn on top of with charcoal, creating layers and pushing them back. So I can tell you what the materials is, I mean, but is that still a painting? I mean, does the painting have to be two-dimensional? Does it have to be, I guess painting is with paint. I mean, if you want to get really down and dirty with it, does it have to be with paint? I don't think I don't think it matters. I think the idea of, to me, what's important to me is to follow my thread of what if. And and sometimes that intention is something about materials. What if I use this product? What if I built up this surface? And what if I drew on top of it with charcoal? What if I covered it with material again? What if I did that with the figure? Right. So, and sometimes sometimes that intention is starts with the concept. Sometimes it starts with the material. I want to be able to express myself in a creative way and using materials, and I don't want somebody putting me in a box and limiting me, even though I limit myself sometimes just to reel it in.
Well, limitations are often good. Like, I'm going to choose to work with these 3 colors and see how far
Exactly.
I found, though, the older I get, the more and learning this plethora of mixed media techniques for 30 years now, the more I'm just getting, I want it to be more simple, like
right.
Charcoal and water and a little bit of oil paint. And I've said this quote before, the art being the technical expertise adequate enough to produce that emotional impact. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for the poetry, right? And this brings me to a next question for you is, when I look for the poetry, I might read a little bit of poetry myself or go out in nature, but then try to forget it all when I go into the studio. And I think, like, once you, like, maybe if you were a composer of classical piano, you might learn that piano, but somewhere you got to just kind of completely let it go so you can let the divine spirit come.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess I wanted to ask you, this brings me to, who are your influences now? I mean, it can change all the time, and that doesn't necessarily need to be an artist, but who has really inspired you over your career, or a thing or a place or a person?
Really hard question for me. That question always kind of makes me stop, because I don't differentiate between my studio and my art and my life. And so I've been influenced by so many people and places and things that I experience. My trip to Santa Fe will influence me, my, being outside, but textures and colors and different artists. I would say right now, this is going to answer 2 of your questions. To go back to the figure, the figure keeps coming back for me. And even if I'm doing purely expressive abstraction, I feel like that is going to influence my figure work when I do my figure work. And the idea of letting those techniques go and come circle around. So the figure is in the portrait is really where my hunger is right now, coming back to. And so I look at like Jenny Saville's work, who's from the UK, Alice Neal, I would say Diebenkorn's figurative work. Who else? Rembrandt, Mark English, who has passed away, but was a really fantastic illustrator. He does these portraits like that are very mysterious, but lots of layers and textures. And I'm wanting to create these figures and these portraits. I don't know what they're going to be yet, but I have enough curiosity that I'm super excited about following that thread. And that's very rich to me. So I look at these artists, I look at different artists for different reasons, like maybe their material, the way they use their materials, the effects that they get, the subject matter, whether it's sculpture or, whatever it is.
This brings me to content. What about portraiture? Why portraiture versus like a narrative painting of figures? What is it about the portrait? And what does portrait mean to you? Like, how would you define that for your own work that you're wanting to express forward right now?
This is a really great conversation because I'm really deep in thinking about this right now, and that I can say, I don't know, but I can tell you what my thinking is. Like this paint piece that I just did that I'm working on is more of a narrative, has more of a narrative than my portraits. And I can see this body of work going in both directions. But the portrait for me, I've moved around so many times in my life and I've met so many people. And when you move when you're young and you move so constantly, you realize that we're all so similar. I mean, I know that this is obvious, but it's not really. Like you move to one place and you can tell who the popular girl is, who the one that isn't, the boys, who's the bully, who's the aggro, who's the alpha. And I was always, even though I'm an extrovert, I'm also I'm kind of an introvert as well. I'm an observer. And in today's, bringing it contemporary, in today's world, we're all so focused on this conversation of identity. And I think it's a really good conversation. I really wish and hope for us that the pendulum swings, right? So that we don't get further and further away from each other as far as trying to identify and put ourselves into pigeonholes. There's so for me, the figure, like when I'm doing these portraits, I'm gathering pieces from different faces. I'm gathering eyes from one image, one person, and a nose from another, and a mouth from another, and then I'm responding. I'm responding to it. I'm not trying to take an image and duplicate it. And that, with the layers of it, the portrait is it's so personal. And I want my work and I want my activities and the work that I do to be closer to the human experience. I don't want to do anything that's going to take me further away from the human experience. And Zoom is great, right? That's actually become more of a human experience than it used to be. But for me, it's a connection with people as well. And connection's really important to me. So when I'm in here, I'm working on the face, or I'm working on a portrait. It's a pretty deep connection to humanity for me that I don't know yet.
Are you saying that I thought I heard, but I'm looking for clarity, like taking the eyes from here or nose from there and here and there, that it is more androgynous, or it's more of I'm looking for a way to see how one person isn't their complete individual, but if I take a little from everything, it becomes more universal.
It becomes more universal. It's not about being androgynous.
It makes me think of the work of, do you know the photo work of Diane Arbus?
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't part of a circus. She did in the 60s, 70s, these black and white photos where she would take basically humanity that was on the fringes, kind of in her culture. And she pierced into them psychologically. She wasn't part of like circuses, but she photographed a lot of people in circuses. And it was this distinction of fringe society. And I know I'm probing you a little, like I'm super interested in like what the psychology is that you're interested in portraying out into the world.
Sure. Yeah. And if I'm not being clear, I apologize. But it's also, you're seeing my way of thinking right now. I'm not being clear because I'd be making something up if I was, if I had an answer right now, it wouldn't be the truth, you guys. So yeah, it would be making it up. And this is a shit that I love so much, because the process of thinking and figuring out, if I had to come up with an answer, that the mystery would be gone. I wouldn't be pursuing the work. I don't know.
Right.
But but I have these clues. Like, I drive to work 20 minutes both ways down to my apartment, to my house and back, and I have to go down State Street, and I see people in camps, and I see people on the corners, and I see people that are on the fringe of society. Then I think about what their lives are, and I think about, they don't have a roof over their head. Then I'm looking through a magazine, and I see this piece. Sorry, I keep doing this. This piece, the layout of it was taken from a high-end magazine. The influence and the what's the word? I was influenced by it. And it's almost like this place of luxury in this interior space, but the people aren't beautiful. Who's to say who gets to sit on that couch and get their picture taken, and it's about humanity, but I don't know yet. But I am interested interested in equality. I'm interested in that we all have, most of us, the same elements that we're born with, and yet we're all so uniquely different by just a little twinge, physically, visually. I'm interested in how do you capture the essence of somebody. I have 2 portraits that are above me, and I just had an open studio, and they weren't for sale, but people were saying, wow, who is that? Where it is, and to get that response, and that they had these stories and feelings about this person that isn't one person, to capture the essence of a feeling of a person and that connection that the viewer has with paint on 2 dimensions is a lifetime of discovery and work.
That was
I hope that's clear, but not too clear.
well, it brought the clarity of the dichotomy of life. It brought the idea of the counterpoint of just getting a glimpse of, like, maybe even something that might inspire you, your drive from your home to your studio, and what you see, and then the flipping of the magazine and seeing the high end. You didn't use the word models, but I'm just going to say it's in a magazine. Oftentimes it is models. And what is that, and then your interpretation of bringing it back and filtering it through your process and then showing the world. And it is that, for lack of a better word, the space between.
Yeah. And that facade, I'm interested in the facade that we give to people and the reality. The facade that we give of, not to take away from it, but you're looking at a magazine with 2 people that they're featuring their home, and they're sitting on their couch, and how much of that is reality, and the pleasing positioning of it, and the aesthetics of it,
Sure,
and the design of it, the reality of it. But I also, going back to, like, what do I want my paintings, like the feel of them? It's always different, but I'm really interested in beauty. And what is beauty? And I know some people get really, they disregard that word and throw it out because it's, or they automatically connect it with ornamentation, which I love. If you're going to do it, go big. I mean, we all adorn ourselves in one way or another. But what is beauty to one person and another? What constitutes beauty? And how do you communicate that with paint or medium as a maker, for, if somebody to give somebody an experience of being able to look at your work and go, wow, there's something about that. I don't know what it is, and even if it's a visceral negative feeling, that connection and being able to communicate that with materials and marry that concept and materials is the space between that I'm interested in.
I'm a, I'm a strong believer that there is a really deep intelligence in beauty, that it's not just surface, that it's a raising of a high vibration, and that high vibration is where we experience compassion and love and a betterment of kindness for humanity. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what are you currently reading? Because I know you're an avid reader. You wake up in the morning. I think about you often, actually. I'm like, I wonder what Stacy's reading this morning.
Oh, that makes me
know
feel
that in
good.
the morning you read something to stimulate your brain, and at night you might be reading a really fantastic novel.
Yeah, I usually, and I know a lot of artists are similar, that, I mean, I have stacks of books, but and in the morning I find my I read with my coffee, and I'm usually reading something that's more thought-provoking. Well, it's all thought-provoking. Well, no, at night I like to read things a little bit more escapism.
What are you
I
reading
love that.
right now?
In the morning, I'm reading Rick Rubin's new book. It is The Creative Act. Have you heard about it or read it? Rick Rubin is out of, and I might botch this up a little bit, you guys, but he is a music producer out of LA. And but he's not just a music producer. He's pretty hot right now because he's just written this book, the Creative Act. And he works with people in bringing out their creativity and pays attention to a lot of details. And it's a beautiful book. It is so thoughtful. And I like things that make me think differently, but also remind me of what I'm doing, and that I can connect, because as an artist working in my studio by myself, we need that confirmation sometimes. And but it's a really great book. And I'm also reading, I just finished a book on Matisse. I'm always fascinated about different artists and how they live and work. What else am I reading? Oh, Alice Neal's book. I just read. I get those big coffee table books and I read them cover to cover.
Oh, I see. So was it produced by a museum from a retro show?
Yeah, for the show I think it was in Baltimore. I could be wrong on this. Baltimore, and definitely it was at the De Young.
We're gonna put for all of you, we will put these links to the people we've been mentioning: Jenny Seville, Deben Korn, Alice Neal, Diane Arbus, Rick Rubin. They'll be in the show notes. So you don't.
Great. Yeah, and you can Instagram us too, and reach out to ask any questions.
Is there, if you were to give advice to a budding artist or someone who is newly, freshly working, what is one of the main things that you might want to say to them?
Wow. How long do I have?
Wow. Short answer.
Yeah, the short answer. You got to do the work. Follow your passion. And find out what that passion is. I mean, that's a lifetime quest, and it's always changing. I mean, try not to. A lot of people want to decide, okay, what, like I said, am I going to be a painter? Am I going to be a sculptor? Am I going to be, of course you have to make decisions eventually. Even within my work, I have to say, okay, I'm going to focus on this right now and get everything else out of the way. So, but I would say to try to have as much internal thinking as you can versus external thinking, and thinking about other people, and think about yourself, because if the work isn't coming from you, then it's not going to be your work. That said, we copy each other. We don't live in a vacuum. That's how you learn. Find people that you're interested in, that you can relate to, that feel good in your soul, and get a mentor. Follow them, talk to them, ask questions. I love it when people literally, are not afraid to ask me questions and reach out and have that conversation. That's a human connection that I want.
Yeah. I've watched, I watched you. You are a fearless workshop taker. And what's really wonderful, back in the day, you were taking more workshops, is you can get, and this is for everyone out there, a full education. We don't need to get MFAs anymore.
Yeah.
So many wonderful workshops and residencies and places to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And, looking back, hindsight, so that year that I did of graduate school, I did a year and a half of graduate school, and I was older, I was 37. And I was so excited. I got a full ride. I was going to be in sculpture and ceramics, and it did not work out. I did not resonate with the program at all. And I realized that the important thing was, and I learned so much from the things that I don't want to do. I learned that I took a break. I stepped back. I learned that I had everything that I needed. All I needed was a commitment to be in the studio working, and yes, I love to take workshops because I love to learn. I'm an avid learner. Now I'm teaching more workshops than I am taking, but I'm always learning. But I look back now and I look at the education that I created for myself by taking things that I was interested in and teachers that I was interested in. And I curated an incredible education for myself. That wasn't the intent. It was just something that I love to do. Yeah. So follow those threads. And I would also, I'm going to jump back in. I would also say, you have to remember, it is a business too. Yeah. That's another conversation, but it is a business.
Yes, and this might be where I diverge from you a little. Yes and no. I mean, I really believe that if you have another way to make money and you just want to work from the soul, highest craft and
absolutely
as you can, then we need to follow that thread. And oftentimes there are times in our life, in order to make our best work, we can't think of the business end, or it just
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the left side, right side that we always, and I should back that up when I say it is a business. The reason that I say that is because I talk to people that are new, that are artists, that are like, I don't want to do that. I just want to create. They do need to, they are wanting to make a living, but they want somebody else to do it for them, the living part of it. And there are people that do that. You can hire somebody to do that. But it's a nice way to, when you're marketing your work, to get out and get to know people. Again, that's another conversation, but depends on your path.
And this brings me to just, as we wrap it up, to talk a little bit about, it will be our second year. We're in 2023 here of this recording, and we're going to be doing we did it pre-pandemic.
2019 was our first class.
We teach a workshop called The Space Between. So if any of you want to come out to Santa Fe, we're going to have 4 full days starting the 3rd week of July. And that will be on the website. But just to talk a little bit about the space between, like, you got a little glimpse of the difference between, and let's go one step further, what is intent and intuition? And what does it mean to have the space between? Because when Stacy and I are teaching, she comes with her plethora of knowing golden acrylics, knowing so many materials, and talking through this intent of practicality. Could you speak a little more of that? And I'll go.
Sure. And I think our workshop is the 2nd week in July. Not the 3rd, but we'll give you the details for that.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah. Sure. So it's a really beautiful combination I think with Lauren and I teaching together, because we kind of drop into it, and you can speak more about that with what you're going to be doing. And in the afternoon, what we're going, not specifically, but it's nice to go between the conceptual part and the material part, and the intention and the intuition. So your intention can be something conceptual, like, I want to create work that is going to be, about civil rights. Your intention can also be, I want to create work that's going to be a limited palette, just with charcoal. You can create these intentions and and then you never know like where those parameters that you're building for yourself, you're creating for yourself, where that's going to take you. I love to show and experience, to teach materials, but I also love on an individual basis for people to help them see their concept through in a material way that they maybe haven't thought about yet, or to give prompts with materials that might be something that you don't know yet, that you haven't discovered, to experiment with. So because we can get stuck in our intention, right? Sometimes to hold on too tight to it, and to have it's great because we're creating a space where we can have these conversations about the conceptual. How do I execute that? Or even something as simple as, let's do this and let's play and let's see what comes out of this that you don't even know about yet.
Well, on that other end of that, with the intuition, I am a strong advocate because I'm an abstract painter, and I don't usually have full intentions of something coming through. And I will see a lot of frustration because it's not coming out the way they want it to. And oftentimes what I find not happening is listening to where the painting wants to go. And that I'll hear people say, I F this up. I'm like, really? Well, let's look at it and see if there's something that happened here that is a surprise that could lead you into another avenue that is beyond what those materials were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think there is a effed up painting. I think it's all an opportunity. And, I think you learn from the materials, you learned from the doing. And this space between what we think and imagine what a piece is going to be and the reality of it, is there's a big space between there that we have to almost change our perspective. And these are the kind of things we get to talk about.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things we get to dive into.
It's somatic. And what I mean by that is we have our intention. So we hold that somewhere in our bodies. And we have this strong intuition that's coming through. And when we check in with what we feel where in the body, we can start naming more than we ever realize and learn about what our process is, our personal process, not necessarily the outcome of the painting or paintings you're working on in a particular workshop. Anyway, that is 2 cents on that. And when Stacy and I get together, we have different viewpoints, but we also have a commonality. I can't quite name what that is right now, but
well, again, do we have to identify it? We do. Lauren and I are very different, but we have this core, and that's why we get to have these great conversations and friendship, and to be able to paint together, because we learn from each other. We respect each other and we learn from each other. And I love that. The possibilities are so big.
Yeah. Well, this has been a delight. Is there anything else that you want to say, Stacy, before we end this?
I would say thank you. And it's always great to talk to you and talk about work and think about it. I would say feel free to reach out to me. My Instagram is Stacy Phillips Art. And my website is Stacy Phillips Art. I'm on Instagram more than I'm on anything. If you have any questions about the workshop, about anything, feel free to reach out.
It'll be in the notes as well. Yeah, down below.
Yeah, those will be in the notes. And I'm really looking forward to our time together.
And with that said, I thank you all. I thank you, Stacy, and until we all meet again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, love. Love you.